Hello, my name is Professor Ahmed Abdelal, and uh, this is the first class of the Anatomy and Physiology for Speech Language Pathology. So, in this class, we are going to speak about the basic concepts or basic elements of anatomy. Generally, when we speak about speech, language, and hearing, or the anatomy of communication disorders, we speak about 5 systems. These are the 5 systems out of all the systems of the body that enable us to speak and to receive, or to basically to communicate, whether by receiving language and processing it, or by expressing language and communicating it to others. So the systems are not really distinctly separated in a clear-cut way. However, we tend to simplify things, and we tend to kind of make boundaries for them so that we can simplify them in the best way for our students. So communication begins with the nervous system. Think about the nervous system in terms of, say, there's a robot, Sophie, the robot, or other robots. But I kind of use Sophie as an example because she is a talking robot, and she's quite sophisticated. Think about the skeletal framework that her body is made out of, and think about the piece that enables her to move her lips and to move her eyes, make facial expressions, and to actually produce speech. All of this is in the hardware. All of this, there's a hardware inside of, what is similar, what we call the skull, the same for a robot, and the software that goes on that hardware is what makes all the difference. If you can imagine taking the software out, the programming that enables Sophie to communicate, then she would be just a piece of, like a mannequin, or some kind of a piece of furniture, for example, that is sitting there. That robot will not be able to do anything at all, would not be able to move, would not be able to, do anything. She will be just an inanimate object sitting, placed somewhere. But once you put the software, that will activate. It will connect with the hands, with the legs, the mouth, and all of that, and that is going to activate the body. So in short, the nervous system of an animal, and particularly we are speaking about humans, is that hardware and software that enable the shell of the body, the muscles and skin and bones, everything that the body is. That brain and the rest of the nervous system is going to enable the body to move around, to move muscles, to kind of hear things and comprehend and channel information and communicate and so on. Without the brain, without the nervous system in general, that body will be practically dead. And that's the definition of death. Is when you say brain dead, it means there's no way for that person to be coming back again to life again. So everything begins with the brain, and everything ends with the brain. Again, I simplify things. When I say brain, I mean the nervous system. Nervous system, as we discuss it later in the course, consists of the brain, the spinal cord, and all the nerves that branch out of the brain and the spinal cord. That's all. So it's like the wiring of the entire body, like electricity, for example. When you think about Sophie, you think about her, and from the skull there is a wiring that goes down into the spine and into the arms, legs, just like a human being is wired. So our nervous system is basically the communication system, and from there most of it is placed in the skull, and from there are cables that go down. Spinal cord is basically a big cable, and out of that cable you take branches to go into your arms and your trunk and your legs, your toes, everything. So that is simply what the nervous system is about, to communicate and to enable the body to move around and to react to things in the environment. The nervous system enables you to breathe. So, for example, it activates, it has nerves that connect on the diaphragm, and nerves that connect on the muscles, and there are centers in the brainstem that regulate breathing and make it automatic. So through that process, when you have the signals coming from the brain into the respiratory muscles, that is going to activate them to enable them to contract, and that is going to enable you, for example, to inhale and to exhale. So the respiratory system depends on the nervous system. So now, once you have filled your lungs with air, you are going to, as the air pressure, as the pressure, from the lungs and the process of exhalation, as the pressures build up, compress the lungs, that is going to force the air out. Now, as we force the air out, the vocal folds are placed in the trachea here. In the larynx, on top of the trachea, and the larynx. And they are placed like a V. There's an opening between them, just like a V. And as the air goes out, we close the vocal folds, and that is going to trap the air. And the air is going to force itself through the closed vocal folds, and that will be the vibration that we know as voice. So that is going to bring us to the phonatory system. The respiratory system enables you to have the air supply that will generate the vibration in the larynx to give you phonation or to give you voice. Now you have the voice from the larynx, from the vocal folds. That voice basically is not speech. It's just a sound, a buzz. As the buzz goes out, it continues to flow through the vocal tract. The vocal tract means oral cavity, nasal cavity. And as the air goes through that vocal cavity and nasal cavity, it vibrates, it makes the air vibrate. It makes the tube of the oral cavity and nasal cavity, it makes them vibrate in turn. And these tubes are going to echo, keep playing and playing and playing the original buzz that came from the vocal folds, so that it doesn't make it die, and it makes it amplified. Because if it wasn't because of the dynamics of the vocal tract, that sound that you make here could be muffled, could be dead before it leaves your lips. So the vocal tract that we use for articulation of the air, as the air goes out, the buzz, we use the muscles of articulation, your facial muscles, your lips, your jaw, the different mechanisms to chop that air, that buzz, chop it into individual sounds and then into words. So that's what we mean by speech articulation. So now you have produced speech, and then you yourself are going to hear your own speech, and the other people are going to also hear your speech. In order to process that speech that you are making, you cannot process it without the brain. So the auditory system is going to carry that signal from the ear, outer ear, to middle ear, to inner ear, to the auditory nerve, and from there to the brain stem that has auditory pathways called ascending auditory pathways. And from there, you are going to go finally to the part of the cortex of the cerebrum, or the cerebral cortex, that is dedicated to hearing and to auditory processing. And then you make sense of what is being said. So these systems, 5 systems, are what we are going to focus on when we, throughout the course. When we say speech is an overlaid function, by this we mean that there's already a system that we use for some major functions, and then speech becomes a secondary function. So you say, well, since we use the mouth to eat, for example, can we use it to speak? Well, we use the vocal folds to kind of breathe. As we breathe in and out, we use the vocal folds to trap the air if we want to, say, dive underwater, or if we want to build pressure, want to push or pull, carry something, we have to close the vocal folds tightly. So these functions are secondary functions. The functions of biological functions of survival, and breathing in and out and so on. These are biological functions, essential and primary functions of the respiratory system. Respiratory. Some people say respiratory. Make sure, respiratory system. So the secondary function of the respiratory system is speaking. And of course, there are people who do not use that modality to speak. They use sign language, and their language is perfect, and they can be understood easily, and they function like everyone else. So they could function without using the vocal folds. However, they could not live or survive without using the respiratory system to breathe in and out and so on. So again, in summary, when we say overlaid, it means already you have a mechanism for using these anatomic organs, but you kind of put on that overlay another function since you already have the system in place. When we look at, now we move on to the basic concepts or basic elements of anatomy. When you look at the terms, if you go to the Latin origins of many of these words, you are going to remember a lot of the words that have to do with anatomy, because a lot of the anatomy anatomic terms come from Latin. So if you know the root words of Latin, you will be able to know a lot of and remember a lot of the terms that are associated with these roots. So when, as a student of anatomy, when you speak, you need to use the anatomic concepts, scientific concepts. You remember, keep in mind that speech language pathology is part of the medical field. and you can't just speak like anyone else. You have to use medical language. You have to speak the anatomic and scientific language. So the anatomic position is the position of the body standing up, as you can see here, with the trunk facing forward, face forward, the chest spread, and the arms and the palms out like this, facing you as a viewer, and the feet are also facing you. That anatomic position applies whether the person is laying on a table flat with on his or her back, or standing up. It is called the anatomic position. Now, if the person is laying down, as you could see in the supine position, laying down on the back, and the difference is the hands are the back of the hands is facing you, okay, like that. That is the supine position. If the person lays on the stomach, as you could see in the neck, the other one in this position, and the palm, the palms are facing you this way, as you could see here, that is the prone position. So in Latin, the word dorsum means back, dorsum. And if you remember that dorsum, like that dorsum or back, think about any animal, and the back of it will become the dorsum of the cat, the dorsum of the sparrow, the dorsum of the human being. We treat organs as if they were animals, on their own. So the brain will have a dorsum, the surface of the brain, or the top of it is called the dorsum. It has a back part that's called the cauda. The frontal part is called a tail. So think about an organ is treated exactly like a creature, as an animal. From dorsum, you derive an adjective dorsal. It has to do with dorsum. For example, fish. On top of it, there's a fin, and on the back, it's called the dorsal fin. So, as far as cauda, that means tail. So the birds, the cauda of the bird, cauda of the cat, that is the tail. When I say caudal, it has to do with the tail, like the caudal hair of the cat. You specifically speak about the fur or hair of the tail of the cat. The caudal fin of a fish. It's the fin that's at the very back of the fish, or the caudal feathers of the bird. The tail, the feathers of the tail of the bird. Of course, if you want to say cut something, you say cut it caudally, cut it dorsally, and you can get other adjectives and adverbs from these. Venter means belly or front. So it refers to the abdominal belly from outside. Venter. Ventral means frontal. Rostra is basically the beak of a bird. So from it, because that also has a reference to the head, so we say rostral. It has to do with the head. Rostrally, it goes in the direction of the head. So here, as you could see in the fish here, ventral, the English word for, the modern word for ventral is frontal or anterior. Two different, frontal, anterior, ventral, mean the same. So you can see on the belly of the fish, there is a fin. That is the ventral fin. Ventral fin. Dorsal, or also a modern word for it, is posterior. So this is the dorsal fin of the fish. Now, medial or mesial. Medial, one of them is from Latin, one from Greek. It means toward the middle, or it has to do with the middle. So look here, for example, the midline is here. If you speak about the medial edge, or for example, the medial part of the belly or the chest, it is towards that line that splits it in two equal parts here. If you move medially, you go toward the middle or the center. If the opposite of medial is lateral, or distal sometimes. So lateral means away from the midline. So here's the midline, and away from it is lateral. Toward it is medial or mesial. So let's take, let's say, imagine this is not the brain, this is the skull, but if the brain is underneath it, the part of the brain that lies under this green area is called the caudal part of the brain. Caudal. The part that's in the front is called the rostral. And the top of it is the dorsal. The bottom of it, if you take the jaw out and the rest of the structures out and look at the bottom of it, that is called ventral or inferior in that case. Sometimes rostral, another word for it is cranial. Now proximal comes, of course, we know the word proximity. It is like you want to describe something with reference to something bigger. So if you want to say, for example, where is, for example, the Washington Monument? Or maybe if someone doesn't know where the Washington Monument is. So, but everyone is going to know where the White House is. So you use the White House as the main reference point and say, well, you know, it is next to the White House, and the proximity of the White House. In terms of proximal, means close to the main body, the main part of the body, the central part of the body. The central part of the body is the trunk. And then the appendages, or the legs and the arms and the head, these are all appendages. So the trunk itself serves as the main center of the body, and something that is close to the center, or close to the trunk, that becomes proximal. So here's my arm. It has a faraway part, distal, at a distance, and as you come closer to the body where it is attached, then as it comes closer and closer, the upper part of the arm is the distal part. The proximal part. Proximal to the main part of the body, which is the trunk. And the opposite again is distal, away from the main body, or the main part, central part of the animal. Trying to take something. So and another term, there are actually three terms that have to do with the directionality, or with the planes of reference. When we speak about the body, it's a three-dimensional object. Most of what you see in the world around us is 3 dimensions: up, down, front, back, and sideways. These are the 3 dimensions. So if you imagine a line, the body itself has a line of symmetry here. From the, see where the hair comes down here, and it goes down, and the nose and the face. Most of the stuff, the structures here are actually, they grow as one part on one side, another part, and they fuse at the midline. So if you make a line here and go all the way down, 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 you split the body into 2 pieces that are even left and right pieces. So that is called a sagittal plane, a sagittal plane. And if you make a cut along the sagittal plane, you divide the body into an equal left and right halves. So that will become a sagittal cut or a sagittal section. Sagittal comes from the word Sagittarius, which means arrow. So you imagine like coming, taking an arrow, it pierces from here, it gets out of the back, and excuse me, then you cut the entire body and from the top and go down all the way down until you split the whole thing into a left and right halves. Then we have frontal or coronal. Coronal doesn't have to do with the coronavirus. Coronal is basically an imaginary cut that is going to split the body into a front and back. The head, like a crown, there's a line here where 2 bones meet, and the suture between these 2 forms kind of the boundary. So you go around here and you go down, splitting the entire head into front and back, as you could see in this picture here, and go all the way down, and that is the coronal cut, or the coronal plane, or the frontal plane. Lastly, there's the transverse cut, which is basically it takes a structure and just slice it in the middle and look in the inside. Like when you take a cucumber like this and you just slice it in the middle into 2 halves, and then you look at the seeds inside, that becomes the, as you could see here, the transverse cut. In terms of how you view or describe your view of something, you can use vocabulary that has to do with the planes of reference, and also with the concepts that we discussed in terms of the directions. So for example, I would like to see a frontal view. Can you identify a frontal view among these? Which one has a frontal view? So of course, here, frontal view. Which one has a posterior view? Or which picture image shows a posterior view? Obviously posterior, this person. Which one shows a superior view? This one. Inferior view. You take the brain and skull, flip them upside down, you look down, and this is what you will see in the inferior view. Even if you take the whole skull and brain and put them up, for example, in the natural position, but you go from beneath and look at them, from underneath, that becomes also an inferior view. What as a profile, original meaning of the word profile is the side view of the face. As you could see here, it's a lateral view. So lateral view, it means it's a profile view, side view. Now I'd like you to look at these and identify these structures, which one is frontal, which one is posterior, superior, inferior, lateral. That is your exercise. So that is a brain. I'll give you a clue as to how you can see this. This is the hemisphere of the brain. This is another hemisphere. And this is the longitudinal fissure that splits the two hemispheres of the brain from here to here, all the way. So you could just take one half and just pull it down. The other one, you'll find a big valley that goes from front to back. So here, this is the larynx, and there's a cut of the larynx. So this will be your exercise. This is a nerve. A nerve is a bunch of axons of neurons. So think about this piece here. When you take it and just cut the whole thing, what kind of cut is this? Or if this, a group of axons, for example, what kind of cut is this? How about this here? What kind of cut is this? This is a piece of your spinal cord. This is a view of the brain. What kind of view? How about this one? I'll leave it up to you. This is an exercise for you. And if you go back to the previous description, you should be able to identify the different views that you see here. Now I'm going to speak about just a quick biology 101, a few concepts from biology. We know that on Earth, when the Earth was created, there was nothing at all on it except just soil and then water, and that's it. All the elements on the Earth are today, as far as we know, between 118, maybe 120, but mostly, for the most part, the ones that exist naturally, about 118. Out of this 118 elements, everything that's on the surface of the Earth comes out of these elements. The cows, buildings, cars, anything on the surface of the Earth that is on the Earth, plants, anything, is made out of some of these 118 elements. So you start with atoms. An element is an atom. You start with atoms. And these atoms come together and they form molecules. For example, we have hydrogen, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen, as this picture shows. What do you get? It's H2, means 2 hydrogens, and then O. That is a molecule of water. And a molecule is bonded, and it stays like that. So atoms come together. Many millions of atoms make molecules. Atoms combine together in different numbers, and they make different kinds of molecules. Molecules combine together to form cells, living cells. And then cells combine together to form tissues. And tissues that are similar in function and nature combine together to form organs. And more than one organ combine together to make a system. For example, the digestive system. It consists of the mouth, the esophagus, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the large intestines, the small intestines, and so on. So all of these are different elements of the same, different organs. The stomach is an organ, different organs of the same system. The nervous system consists of the brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves and nerve extensions that come out of them. That is a system. So the brain is an organ. The spinal cord is an organ. The nerves are organs, and they combine together to make a whole system. You can think about the articulatory system, the vocal tract, for example, the nasal cavities, and then the mouth, oral cavities, the tongue. These are all organs, and they combine together to form the articulatory system. And then multiple systems connect together and are interconnected and communicate together, and they form a whole body. So now we speak about some basic kinds of tissue. Contains 4 kinds of tissue, and they combine in different ways to enable the body to perform its functions. So first kind is muscle tissue. I'm sorry, let's go in that sequence. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue, or epithelium, lines up the internal cavities of the body. For example, inside of your cheeks, inside of your nasal cavities, inside of your intestines, all the inside like surface with epithelium. Epithelium is stretchy and flexible, rubbery. The top part of the vocal folds that actually makes most of the vibration for speech is epithelium. Connective tissue provides support, strength, and elasticity. That connective tissue includes bone. Believe it or not, blood is connective tissue. And then muscle tissue. The main property of muscle tissue is that it is able, it can contract if it is given an electrical current. So muscles are stretchy, flexible. You stretch, they come back again together. They become longer and shorter. So if you give it an electric signal from the nervous system, you give it innervation, the muscle can contract. It means it can shorten like this. When it contracts, any structure that is tied to the muscle will be pulled in the direction of the root of the muscle. So for example, your biceps. So one is connected, they have tendons coming out of the upper arm, and one of them connects onto this area here of this bone, this lower arm, and another one connects farther. And when I contract the biceps, both pieces, both will shorten and will pull with them my arm, this part of the arm, my forearm, I mean. So then, the way that the muscles, that the nerves connect with the muscles, they form the neuromuscular junction. That is where the chemicals, neurotransmitters from the neurons or the nerves go on to activate the muscles, to jerk them and make them contract and move. But without neural activation, the muscle just is a piece of meat. It doesn't do anything. There's one thing that a muscle can do, and that's the only action it can do. It can contract. Do not make the mistake and say a muscle pushes. That doesn't exist. Muscles never push. Muscles can only contract, shorten, and if there's something tied to them on the other end, they pull it in the direction toward their origin. And this is why when we study muscles, we study the origin of a muscle and the insertion of the muscle. And the insertion tells you what organ will be pulled and acted upon. And the root of the muscle means in what direction will the muscle pull. And the muscle always pulls toward its origin. So, and then we have nerve. So nerve tissue is special because it communicates with all kinds of tissue in the body, and it gives the electric innervation that muscles act and glands will squeeze or be compressed so that they can release, say, tears or sweat or whatever you call it. So nervous system can communicate and activate various parts of the body. Then there are tissue combinations. Out of these four, one kind of combination is a ligament. Ligament comes from the word ligare, means to tie, from Latin word ligare. And a ligament is like a thread, very, very tough thread. It doesn't extend much, it doesn't like stretch much, but it's very, very tough. And the ligament connects bone to bone. Okay, your knee, for example, has ligaments. There are also cartilage to bone can also be connected with a ligament as well. But for the most part, ligaments connect bone to bone. And tendons, see, look at this muscle. It's a muscle fiber. On one end, as it goes to connect with the bones, it forms into a flexible structure that is neither muscle nor bone. And it is a combination kind of a tough fibrous tissue, and it connects a muscle with a bone. So tendons connect or attach muscles to bone. On the other end, there are also tendons connecting the same muscles to bones. Lastly, we are going to just look at cartilage because we have a lot of areas in our body, especially that are dedicated to communication, that are made out of cartilage. And if they weren't made out of cartilage, our life would not be possible. For example, the only reason you can breathe is that in front, where the ribs, the bones of the ribs meet the chest bone that we know as the sternum, there are pieces of cartilage in the front that connect each rib to the sternum. And on the base here, the cartilage becomes bigger and bigger as you go toward, inferiorly. So in order to inhale and you want to expand your thorax or your chest, you have to lift up the thorax and extend these pieces of cartilage to allow for the creation of more space to get air in. Without that, respiration, breathing would not be possible. We have cartilage in our noses, in your outer ears, all of cartilage. The part of the ear canal inside has cartilage. The eustachian tube is cartilage. So cartilage is very essential in many cases for communication. What makes it special and able to function, to perform the great functions it does, is that it has elasticity. It has properties that will make it able to function well. It has, one of the properties of cartilage is elasticity. That means when you stretch it, it bounces back to where it was originally. Elasticity, the ability of or the force that causes the organ that is deformed to return to its original position after reset or after the pressure is removed. Like if you have an elastic rubber band, you pull, and the force is going to make it harder for you. As the farther you pull, the greater the force will be, or the resistance from elasticity. And as you let go, that the elastic force will pull back the two ends of the elastic to come together to rest. Elasticity it enables cartilage to bounce back to, like if you take your ear and deform it like this, compress it, let go, it will, luckily your ear will go back to where it was. If you stretch it, you let go, it goes back to the original position. Cartilage has another property, which is tensile. Tensile, it's like when you stretch it, you